Hey, I'm Kevin and welcome to Barre Chords for Baritone, Day 2, and today we're going to check out a couple of new chord shapes and spend some time playing them together. So get yourself tuned up and let's get to it. Hey, before we get started, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and click that alert bell so you know when the next video is coming your way. If you're interested in more learning resources, head over to allforuke.com where we have a full searchable library of songs, song sheets, practice tracks, worksheets, and more. All for you, allforuke.com. So today we're going to talk about major chord shapes. So the first major chord that I feel like you're going to come across typically when you're playing baritone is the F chord. So the F chord, when you play that, looks like this. Ring finger on the D string of the 3rd fret, middle finger on the G string of the 2nd fret, and then index barring the bottom 2 strings of the 1st fret. So your F chord looks and sounds like this. You could also play it by taking your index finger and fully barring that 1st fret, kind of using the outside part of your index finger to get a nice good compression on the strings, and you get the same chord by barring the whole thing. So you might want to experiment around a little bit with that because sometimes it's a little more difficult to get all of the strings to ring out cleanly with this index finger down here. I will also say that when you're playing this chord, try to make sure that your thumb is right behind where your index and middle finger kind of meet behind that 1st fret there. That's going to give you a nice good squeeze point to get compression on all of those strings. So that is the F chord. I also want to mention this is coming from the E shape. So the F chord, if you look at it here, if we were to take this chord and move it down towards the headstock, we're playing an E chord now. So E and F are right next to each other. They're one semitone apart. So I want you to think of these chords again as shapes because the shapes can be moved around and F chord becomes other chords on the neck. So let's see how that kind of looks here. So if I take this F chord and I move it towards the body 1 fret, that's an F sharp chord. I move it over here where my ring finger's on the 5th fret, that becomes a G chord. G sharp to an A sharp to a B. So this is good because when you start using these as shapes, you realize that you have access to all sorts of chords within this region here just by changing the shape that your hand is in. So that's the first shape that we're going to use today, and we'll use that in one of the play-alongs. And the second shape that I want to show you is going to be coming from the C shape, and I'm going to show you that as a D chord to start. So for this D chord here, we bar the 2nd fret with our index finger, and we place our ring finger on the D string of the 4th fret, middle finger on the B string of the 3rd fret, and that sounds like this. So again, my thumb is sitting pretty much right behind my index finger for the pinch point there, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping my hand forward. I'm really on top of my fingertips here with my ring and middle finger, and I'm on the outside of my index finger to get that bar down. So when you're practicing this, you know, maybe take a few times here and just take the chord off, try to set it back down. Try to take your fingers and really get them used to going right back to the same place every time. Really build that muscle memory up. And as you do that and get more comfortable, then spend some time just going through and single strumming the chord to make sure that all of the notes are ringing out nice and clean and clear. If you're starting to hear those little dead notes in there, that's just telling you get a little more compression on the strings, get a little bit more tone coming out of the instrument here. So again, this is a D chord, but it comes from a C shape. So if I were to take this D chord and start moving towards the headstock, well, this D chord becomes D flat, and then ultimately down here on 1st position, it's a C chord. So when I have my shape, I could take this C chord, move it up to D on the 2nd fret. If I want to make it into an E chord, I move it from D to D sharp to E. It becomes an F chord if I'm on the 5th fret, an F sharp chord on the 6th, and a G chord on the 7th. So now you have all of these major chords here, and if you watch day 1, you have a whole bunch of 7th chords here, minor 7s and dominant 7s you could use all within this area. So really focus on learning these as shapes so that you can put your own progressions together and kind of utilize all of these bar chords that you have access to in this area. So next we're going to look at a strumming pattern that we're going to use for today's play along, so let's get into that. If you're digging the sound of my uke, head over to allforuke.com/shop. You can have a Kala ukulele for yourself. When you buy your Kala ukulele through All for Uke, you're supporting us, and we really appreciate it. Make sure you check it out. Concerts, sopranos, tenors, baritones, a wide selection of accessories, capos, and more. All for you, allforuke.com/shop. So the strumming pattern that we're going to use today is called the island strum. Very common, used in standard and baritone strumming. The pattern itself is down, down, up, up, down, up. So we're going to use an F chord here to demonstrate. If you like to count while you strum, which I think is very helpful and I encourage you to do it, the count is 1, 2, and 4, and. So this is a 4/4 strumming pattern, so as you're counting, everything is in 4. So let's try that together. We'll just do it nice and slow. I'll give us a 4 count in. We'll hold an F chord while we're doing it. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and. All right, so for our first play along today, we're going to use this F chord and we're going to move it around a little bit. So the first chord will be F, and then we're going to shift over to the 5th fret and turn it into a G chord. And we're going to shift again up to the 7th fret, turn it into an A chord, and we'll move back down. So we'll do that 2 times with the strumming pattern on each one. Now, something I've been asked by some of my students is, when moving between these chords, do I want to lift up my hand and set them back down for the bar chord? My answer is no. The best way to do this is keeping the pressure on the strings and maybe just decompressing a little bit, but use the strings to guide you up to the next chord, because especially in a situation like this, your hand is going to stay in the same position, in the same shape, so lifting it off is just making more work for yourself. So I'd encourage you just to kind of walk through this progression a couple times. And what I like to do is squeeze, decompress, squeeze, decompress every time I land on the chord. So you give yourself a little break in between 2. So we're going to do it 2 times per chord. I'll count us in. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and switch. Going up to the A. To the G. You might hear a little slide in between. That's okay. Sounds kind of cool. Up to G. And up to A. And then we'll finish it off here on the G. All right, for our second play along here, we're going to do a combination of the 2 shapes. So we're going to start off with our F chord. We're going to go down to our first position C chord, because typically when you're playing bar chords, you're not just playing bar chords, you're playing a combination of first position and second position shapes too. So it's nice to learn how to switch in and out of them. So after the C chord, we're going to move up here back to a G chord, and then we'll finish it with a D chord using that C shape. So we'll do the strumming pattern 1 time per chord. I really love the sound of this progression, so if you come up with a little song for it, let me know. Here we go again with a 4 count in. 1, 2, 3, 4. F, C, G, D, back bars here if you notice that. F, C, G, D. One more time, you guys got this? F, C, G, D, and an F. So tell me about your experience with bar chords so far. Are the seventh shapes a little more challenging, or do you find these shapes in the majors to be a little bit more challenging? Let me know in the comments, and also spend some time working on these shapes and moving them around the neck. I think you'll explore and find some new things about the uke as you do that. I also want to mention that I have a worksheet for you guys at allforuke.com. You can check that out. I've put together a bunch of exercises where you get to use these various shapes with the same strumming pattern and kind of work on them with metronome tempos, and that is the best way to get better at this. So again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here for day 3.